during this ramp up of the VA accountability bill, her and the local homeschoolers in our area did over 13,000 IDs. And that was a big precipitating factor for us getting the ball rolling on this VA accountability. You know, we're going to touch on it a little bit later, but just put the bug in your ear. Think about this for a second. A very, very liberal president is going to privatize the only single-payer healthcare system our federal government actually has in the VA health system. And a large part of that, you can clap for that, by the way, that's a big accomplishment. And a large part of that is because of the phone calls these kids did. And my daughter was part of it, my 9-year-old was part of it too. And they understand that there are things that we do for other people. And so whether it's in the church, I'm trying to constantly make them aware of the world around them and that we need to help people out. How this actually plays out most of the time is that neighborhood kids get invited en masse to my house for dinner. And then it's constantly, well, Dad, you said we're supposed to help our community. I didn't say necessarily feed them all, but whatever. Of course. All right. So Jeremiah's poking me and saying I've had enough time. So we're going to talk about the examples of an activist mindset at the parental level, and then we're going to talk a little bit about CBA, and then we're going to do questions and answers, and we'll be done. I promise.
All right. If you haven't understood the dynamic, this is the dynamic of us being siblings. Kind of like, all right, Nathan, you've had your turn. All right, come on. Give the younger kid a chance. All right. Anyway, so examples of an activist mindset, and Nathan touched on this a little bit. Just a little bit of background before I get into this slide. We grew up in the church. Our dad was a pastor. My brother was around when he was planting churches across Canada. When I was growing up, he was planting churches in the Midwest. And so we've grown up in the church, a staunch conservative family. And so we grew up in this, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about our experiences. He talked a little bit about his experiences as a dad. But let me tell you this. Not just growing up in the church, because we were always involved in the church and we were always involved in that, but we were always involved in our communities. Whether it be a church function or not, we were always involved in our communities. And it wasn't a matter of, growing up, it wasn't a matter of if we were going to be involved in our communities. It was never a matter of if my parents were going to vote. If anything, it was just a matter of what time of day they were going to vote, right? Every single time they were there voting. They were there when there was a critical issue. They were there in their community. And growing up, we saw this. And we saw the importance of this. So when we're talking about examples of the role of parenting, and that's what we're going to talk about. Number one, set the example. I've got a 3-year-old, so I haven't really had a chance to do this much. But that is my goal, to set the example, so that when he is my age or even younger, that he's the oddball out. He is the one that's getting involved, even when his peers couldn't care less. And so one example is voting as a family. And I don't really recall if we did this growing up, but just a couple months ago, last year, I saw my brother take his entire family, at 5 at the time, the 6th is a recent addition, took the entire family, and they went to the polling location. And so his wife Mandy had a couple of the kids, and he had a couple of the kids, and they were showing them. And so when I voted in the primary in May last month, my son was in the car, and I was like, come on in. So he looks over to my wife, and he says, Mommy, I'm going to vote with Daddy. Obviously, he doesn't know what voting is, but he was excited. And as he gets older, he's going to understand the ramifications of that and what that means, and that this is important. And once again, that there's a bigger world than just the world that revolves around us, or supposedly does. And so voting as a family is a perfect example but integrating cultural filters at every opportunity. That's why we talked about this, because it's every day. It's being involved with your kids. It's being involved with your grandkids. It's being involved with those in your community, and using every moment as a learning opportunity. To say, well, here's this, whatever the case may be, here's this television show, what are they talking about here? What is the, what is the ideological, what is the philosophy of life that they're espousing here? And is this something that we should recreate? Is this something that we should accept? Or is this something that we should be more discerning of and maybe reject that aspect? It's constantly implementing those filters and teaching our kids how to do that. Teaching our kids how to discern what's right and what's wrong. Because we've got so many kids out here that, especially college-age kids, that hear these talking points and they hear, well, that sounds good. We should just help everyone and everyone deserves to be helped. Well, absolutely. I believe that. I believe it's our Christian responsibility to reach out to those that are less fortunate. But as conservatives, we know there's a way to do that works and that's beneficial, and that's not through the government. And a side note, but I think that's something that's been kind of dragged away from the church, is the church has actually allowed the government to fulfill its obligations, and that's completely wrong. But it's learning and it's teaching our kids and those around us to integrate these filters at every step of the way. And of course, we mentioned this earlier, and we're going to talk about this. This is our very next slide. But letting our children volunteer their time, their talent, and their treasure, and what that means.
I'm just going to explain these slides. We had a D-Day event in Columbus. That's on the left-hand side, and we brought in D-Day veterans. And for the first time, and a lot of the kids who were in attendance, they actually learned about D-Day. You would be surprised when people don't know about D-Day. Maybe you're not surprised, but I was really shocked. We were giving out tickets to this event at a Columbus Clippers game. And I don't know, about every third person was like, what's D-Day? These weren't kids. These were people probably my age in their 20s and 30s. They really didn't know what D-Day was. That's what happens when you give really big events a paragraph in a book, and it's always at the end, and you never really get to it in the first place. But upper right is the kids, homeschoolers calling on the Million Vet Backlog, which we helped through. Bottom right, they met with Congressman Teaberry, who supported the VA Accountability Act. And so we thanked him for supporting that because we're able to meet with him. So they're actually able to see the fruits of their labor, and so that was really important to us. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about this a little bit, but we as Concerned Veterans for America have a 501c3 program that if you make phone calls for us, and our kids do this, and if you make phone calls for us, we donate money to the charity of your choice. For some of the kids, they're actually raising money for missions trips. And so we've worked with their churches, and however many phone banks they do, we actually donate money to the churches for their missions trip. So it's not just a matter of political action. We have a whole bunch of these homeschool kids who are now going to be going to Thailand and Guatemala and other countries to broaden their experiences as well. So it's a really integrated what we do here at Concerned Veterans for America. I'll just touch briefly on it. If this is something that you possibly are interested in for your local youth groups, your kids, your grandkids, youth soccer teams, sports teams, whatever, get with us, get with Jeremiah. We'll get you more information on that. With that, I was going to go right to questions, but he wants to close it out. This is what you get with a pastoral major, just saying.
I've always got to have the last word. No, I'm just kidding. But,